Go ahead and start. And now, you've all been warned. So if your video's on, you might be on the recording, just so you know. But thanks so much for joining us. As you all know, this is tips on really unexpectedly managing remote teams. So it's to help you improve collaboration among your teams as well as productivity. So pretty excited to be doing this. We did a similar virtual lunch last week, focused more on tips for working remotely unexpectedly for those that are not used to actually working remotely. This is really more from the management or a leader's perspective on how to manage those teams. But a lot of it will apply to working as well for you. So just a quick thing, I'm James, and this is our ProFocus team. It's still a little goofy picture from our strategic planning meeting, but this is our team here in Portland. We're a technology staffing company here in Portland. My background, I have quite a bit of experience in leading teams at both nonprofit and private sector here at ProFocus. Oversee all of our business operations here at ProFocus. And one thing that we strive to do is really support and give back to the Portland tech community in a variety of ways, including events like this. We also do a leaders lunch series, which we've pivoted a little bit to this format to help provide some value for those of you out there. But we also have a leaders lunch series for when this pandemic is over. But if anyone's interested in, feel free to let us know. We can get you on an invite list. It's a more intimate, about a dozen or so that we have lunch together, and just an opportunity to discuss challenges and best practices of a variety of issues that you face within your role. So that's it about me and ProFocus. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in. Quick agenda. Presentation portion is just on unexpectedly managing remote teams. There's going to be a mix of things in here that might be best practices that you're familiar with. So some of it will be a little bit more advanced, and so you might be familiar with some things as well. But we'll go through quite a bit of that, and then we'll have our discussion portion. So obviously, as you all know, social distancing is highly effective at breaking chains. So most of you, I would imagine, are all working from home right now, and many of you are very unaccustomed to working remotely. So many companies and teams have just been scrambling to prepare. Those of you that were already prepared or had some ability to work remotely in the past, or maybe you majority work remotely, are a little bit more prepared. But a lot of companies and teams are now preparing to potentially be working remotely for several months. So we laid out an action plan just for our internal team, as well as for others, with a variety of tips, suggestions, and ways to manage remote teams effectively, to work remotely well, and then obviously in relation to this COVID-19 crisis, some other things in approaching things a little bit differently than you might if you were just working remotely, because there are some unique challenges with the situation that we have in front of us. As I mentioned before, anyone that's joined in recently, feel free to go ahead and pop any questions into the conversation, and we may get to it throughout this presentation portion, but we'll also go ahead and definitely have a discussion portion at the end where we can address all of your questions and open things up for people to share their own best practices and share their own questions verbally as well to really discuss. So the first I wanted to address is our focus on collaboration and communication. It's so important if you're used to working next to one another, and if you're used to being in the same office with one another. That communication piece is so important. When we're hearing, and for us in our office as well, we're all in the same space, and so we see each other. We are used to seeing each other every day, and so much of our communication is done just not in a formal setting, not through meetings and not through our daily stand-ups, and so much of it is done just walking by someone's desk, checking in on an ongoing basis after we hear updates on things. And so what a lot of leaders are doing now is they're really encouraging their teams to over communicate. So when in doubt, we're really encouraging teams to over communicate and share, not just with individual team members. One of the challenges that you can have is a lot of chatting where normally other people would be a part of that in the office, where you might have direct communication, whether it's Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever platform you use, to avoid knowledge silos. really encouraging, whether it's channels that you have set up for communication, um, or anything like that, that if you learn something from one individual, or if you're sharing with one individual, make sure that you share all need to know information with all other team members as well. So this is really important from the leadership perspective as well, that you are being sure to really over communicate as well, because your teams are really expecting that too. Video conferencing is huge, and you guys can see me, you can see Madeline, and if anybody turns their video on at the end, I think it makes a huge difference. A lot of companies are moving to all of their communication over video. So they're essentially moving all their meetings, all their stand-ups, and all their huddles, and even phone calls. So they're really, some companies are requiring it, some are just really strongly encouraging it. This is something that we shifted at ProFocus to where everything is over video. And that's been really good for us. So we really like it because, we're used to seeing our team every single day, and it keeps that human element versus a conference call. As you all know, just the difference is there to actually be able to see somebody smiling and communicating with your teams in that way, I think makes a big difference. So that's what we're seeing a lot of. And one of the things, just a little best practice tip is as well, is to recommend your team use laptops or their desktop to and avoid those tiny little heads. So you see, people like sometimes they're really far away, but kind of takes away from the video. And if you're so far away, but that's just a little bit more of a basic on that. So and creating a culture of connecting often. So we're seeing a lot of this, and we do that as well, to where we feel that it's important to just act as if they're in the workstation next to you. Jump in to that as well, is to do that is, it's really important to know when somebody's in the office and when they're not. So when they're available, when they're busy. We're seeing, we have teams. Obviously you guys are on Teams right now for this this conversation, this presentation, but whether you have Slack or any other tools, I'm curious what other people are using, but we have our team regularly update their availability, and there's a lot of reasons why we do this. And one of the most important ones, I think, is to just know when someone's available, that you can reach out to them. It's going to be really hard with the work-life balance, which we'll talk a little bit more about here soon, with people being in their homes all the time. And whether you're using Teams or whatever it is, there's a variety of different statuses, but we've encouraged our team, mark yourself as available, busy, or be right back, or away, so that we don't bug you or call you when you're having family time, when you've left for the day. And it also just allows you to know that, hey, if somebody's available, you can just go ahead and call them anytime, as if they were in the in the workstation next to you. So we've really encouraged that culture, so that everybody feels comfortable and that they're not interrupting someone, if their status is accurately updated. Sharing calendars helps with that too. You can take a look at somebody's calendar, and then adding meetings whenever that's possible. We've added an afternoon stand-up, and we've also added weekly huddles just to improve communication. So much communication gets lost through this. I'm sure you guys are already experiencing some of that with some of your teams, to where normally you'd have a lot more check-ins, like water cooler check-ins, for example, or just that communication just isn't happening as much. So we've set up a couple of different ways to stay connected, and hopefully, if it's not adding too much time to people's day in meetings, we'll probably get some kickback. But I've been surprised at how much I've heard from others as well, and our own team, that people have appreciated that, and it's really easy to dial some of that back too. So another one, the huddle is really just, that's a weekly for us. It's completely a team-driven agenda, and so allow your team to come together and share any challenges, and then also they can connect personally in that too. But whether it's just a couple of minutes or 30, it's an opportunity on a weekly, or you can whatever frequency is appropriate for your teams. One thing I think is super important is to keep the fun, and I'm really excited to hear what others are doing. But some things that I've seen and that we've started to do, love to share with you guys. But it's a real challenge when you go from being in the office every day or most days to then keeping that culture going and keeping the fun going. And so really just don't lose the fun of the communication in the office. So encourage any team leads that you have to be a champion of that. So if you have any people in your office or on your team that are really super positive, whether it's a lead or not, you might want to ask them and encourage them to, hey, help carry the culture and help keep it, even though we're online or over video. Let them bring their ideas too, because they're going to have some really creative ideas that they'll share, and that you can also just have them run with them. We actually made some pretty fun things, a daily virtual water cooler. This is an opportunity to jump into a video anytime, and somebody can join you as well, just to connect on a personal level. But it's also a channel too for people to share memes and just anything fun that they have to share throughout the day. That I think has really helped lift people's spirits in this time. So a little bit more casual than we probably are typically in the office, but it's been received really well. We also have a virtual team lunch. It's totally optional, but anyone that's available on really any day during lunch, but we have it on the calendar for Fridays, where you can just pop in and have lunch together. So there's just a couple of ideas that you might consider, and encourage your team to just share more than they might normally. Any inspiring or positive, fun communication on those channels. And the other thing that we've done too, and this I think really helps with a good work-life balance, is not losing that good morning, not losing the, have a good night. That's a big part of our culture. Everybody knows when everybody comes into the office, because, we walk in, everybody says good morning. If we're leaving to lunch, we say, hey, I'm heading out to lunch. I'm going to go grab some of this or that. We didn't want to lose that. And a lot of companies are doing the same kind of thing, where they're encouraging their teams to share that. I love it. Just so that I know that I'm not going to bug one of my team members when they say they're out for the day. So if they say they're out for the day, I'll try, unless any team members of mine are going to call me out in this, I try not to send emails or requests of them after hours, and just hold them, keep it in drafts and just hold that message, or hold, whatever the request might be, so that they can have a good work-life balance. It's one of the challenges, especially with the social distancing and so many people being locked in at their homes. There's a natural obligation that team members feel to respond to that right away. And by them just communicating that they're out for the day, hopefully allows you to understand that, yeah, you can go ahead and hold off on that message. So the same thing for when people get in the morning. So that's just some of the fun. I'm really excited to hear what other people are doing to keep their culture going, and to keep the fun of the office while you're all working remotely. Staying productive at home, I'm encouraging our team to pretend like they're going into work. So I do, this is a best practice I've done for a very long time, is anytime I work remotely, I dress the part. I don't usually wear a jacket. We're a little bit more of a casual office. But I'm generally not a very casual person anyway. But I like to pretend I have a morning, routine. I make my coffee in the morning, and then that helps with the transition to work, especially when we aren't, going into the office, and when most of us aren't going out of the house very much. Encouraging your team members, if they're having a tough time with the transition, to create some sort of a morning routine or an end of day routine. The other one thing that we're seeing a lot of really good leaders, we had a conversation yesterday with some of our clients that are managing remote teams, and that they're really encouraging, they're just being extra supportive of the home office and what people need. And if you have a budget, to consider trying to get in. Some of the things have been very simple things that our team has needed to just help them be more effective. So it may not break the bank, but if you have a budget, be as make sure that you're checking in with your team members. I'd really recommend that, and not just once. So the first time you request it, a lot of your team members might say, "Oh no, I'm good," but then the more they think about it, make sure that in your one-on-ones, I highly recommend that you check in on an ongoing basis to make sure that nothing else has come up. And I think some people would be surprised at how little or inexpensive some of the things are that just by you asking a couple times, it helps them really understand that you're really interested in helping. Accountability is another one too. So everyone should still be accountable to whatever expectations you have, and so communicating that really clearly, and that while they're all working from home, I don't imagine that most organizations are changing much on the expectation side. Some might even be going up from what I've heard, but just make sure that communication is really clear, and if there are changes in expectations, that your team knows that, and so that they can follow along accordingly. At least have confidence knowing what's expected of them. Maintaining your sanity too. So this goes along with, I talked about work-life balance a little bit already, but encouraging your teams to have some sort of a regular office hours. It can be, and this is me, and I'm sure all of you have the same problem where it can slip away. And if you have, if you start to blend a little bit too much between work and home, then to really consider setting some hours and setting an appropriate distance between your work and your home life. So I have a separate office space, and I try to only do work in my office so that that line isn't blurred. Not everyone on your team is going to have that. So checking in with them, I think, is really important to help maintain their sanity. But allowing them to tweak their typical hours also might be helpful too. But I'm curious what others are doing as well that we can check in with. I'm not sure if we have any questions that have come up that might be relevant to bring up at this point or later, but I'll move along. And Madeline, feel free to interrupt at any point if you feel like any are relevant to talk about now, or just wait for the discussion portion.
Yeah, we were just chatting about the tool that we use for the virtual water cooler, and what other people had suggestions about. But I think we can circle back at the end of give some tool suggestions, resource suggestions.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. We use Teams for ours, and I know some others use Zoom and Slack, and but we'll talk more about that. And I'd love to hear what other people are doing. So. One thing that has really hit home for a lot of people, and maintaining your team sanity and yours as well, is just that social distancing has been such a challenge for some of our team members, as well as others that I've heard. People that are used to having certain outlets, going to the gym, for example, and all sorts of things, or people that may not have a family or friends close by, or roommates, and they're by themselves. So just something to be mindful of, as you're working with the teams. And I think we're going to check in on that here just in a second as well. But thinking about the employee's perspective is, I can't imagine anybody who's not approaching all your conversations and these challenges with empathy. So I think this is a given and pretty obvious. But this might be the first recession that many of your team members are going through. It might be your first recession as well. But just being mindful of how much uncertainty, even if they don't bring it to you, how much uncertainty, fear, and doubt, even if you're in a really strong industry that's doing well right now, there's so much fear that everyone's going through. So just being mindful of your approach with your team, and what they might be going through emotionally throughout this process. But just doing what you can to be as supportive as you can. And I mentioned the social distancing is taking a toll on a lot of us, but it's really impacting some a lot more than others. Childcare challenges, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, what others have creative solutions that people have come up with. But some of them might be experiencing pretty significant childcare issues. So it might result in some potentially hilarious interruptions. We've definitely had some pretty funny ones. I won't call anybody out in particular on our team, but some pretty funny ones throughout the process, whether it's meetings, and one-on-ones or anything like that. But just being empathetic about that as well. I imagine that all of us are. But it's probably something that's worth mentioning to your team, that you understand that those will happen. And this is a little bit different than typical work from home. But if you have a pretty strict culture around that, then I think it's important to be mindful of some of the challenges that your team's facing. So they're also expecting a lot of communication from you, and transparency. They're expecting updates, challenges that you're seeing. This is definitely time to be transparent, and they're just your team is pulling a lot, as you all understand, they're pulling a lot of their confidence from your confidence and how you're approaching the situation. So just something to be mindful of. Every little thing you say and do can be perceived positively or negatively. So just something to keep in mind. And we talked a little bit about performance expectations, but they really needed to have clear expectations. And are the expectations the same? Have they changed? And whether they are the same or if they've changed, they want to know. So just keeping that in mind. I mentioned the discussion we had yesterday. I actually was not at the discussion. Aubrey on our team was, but some of our clients got together for something similar to this, and just really it was just more of an open discussion, which we'll get to in just a few minutes, as we wrap up the presentation portion. But here are just some of the little tips that came from that. Other technology leaders that have been managing remote teams now, some that have experience managing remote teams and others that have just been transitioning, but some good little nuggets there. I'm not going to dive deep into each one. You can read them. But just some really good takeaways that we had there. Also some really great book suggestions, Leaders That Lasted and Start With Why. Those are two of my favorite. I love them actually. Partway through Leaders That Last, but it's really good. So far, I'm wrapping that one up soon, but Start With Why is great as well. So that I'm here for you culture, I think is really critical too. So it ties into the employee's perspective and what they're expecting from you, but just knowing that you're there for them, I think is pretty huge. So I just threw a couple things, just I'll go through this real quick, but just some things to be happy about for anyone that's down. One of my team members, I shared a live stream of pandas. There's like a panda cub and a mom that's that we're playing at a zoo, and it's just a live stream of pandas, puppies, and northern lights. But for one of my team members, that brought a lot of happiness, a lot of joy, in some of these tough times. So just some things to be happy about. But in general, though, I think technology is really positioned well. That's what we continue to hear. Pretty optimistic about our industry and how we can still do well despite some of the challenges that we're facing and potentially what's ahead too. But I think we're positioned well to come out of this fairly strong. And another one that we've been hearing a lot of is more and more companies, for whether this is something that you are happy about or not, but more and more companies are expected to embrace working remotely in the future after the situation. So just because of how many that were resistant to this change are now forced to the change, the more companies are going to recognize that, hey, we can actually still be successful. We can make this work with our teams. And which I think is really good from a talent perspective, and I think it's really good for leaders as well, being able to get some really great talent on your teams, and knowing that if you can have some of that flexibility, where the organizations that haven't, and obviously this is company to company what works for you, but some people I know are really pretty excited about that. So. I'll move along here now. Some resources. We'll send out the slide deck for anybody that wants it, and you can follow these links. We also have some. There's a March 2020 economics trends report that's specific to this COVID-19 crisis. So you can request that from us. We have that report, as well as some variety of HR compliance updates for any of you that may also have HR within your responsibilities, smaller or mid-sized organizations. We have those resources, but here's some other really good ones that you can feel free to check out. Now I'm going to actually go ahead and turn off the recording and stop recording, and then feel free to, this is going to be more of a questions and challenges and get to the discussion, open discussion portion of our